Hi, my name's Kent Darr, and I'm the commercial real estate reporter for the Business Record. And we're asking you to listen in today, sort of be a fly on the wall for a conversation about land development in Des Moines and Greater Des Moines. This is one of 4 videos that we're producing that focus on various segments of the commercial real estate market. We're doing this in conjunction with the rollout in late April of a new Business Record product called Annual Real Estate Guide. And we hope to generate some content for the Real Estate Guide, generate some story ideas for me so I can stay busy in the next few months here at the Business Record. And also help you make your decisions as business leaders and as you go forward on your planning for your future needs. As I mentioned, the guide will publish April 29th, and we'll have a little bit of a soft rollout April 20th with our annual commercial real estate event. In addition, the videos will be available from our website, and we'll be providing links to the videos as well from our electronic publications, the Business Record, Twice a Day Dailies, and the Commercial Real Estate Weekly. With us to talk about land development today are Joe Pietruszynski, who's the Vice President of Land Development for Hubbell Realty Co, Chris Della, Vedova, who's a principal and co-founder of Confluence Architects, who's also an urban planning business. Phil Delafield, who's the Community Development Director for the City of Des Moines, and Jake Christensen, who is the head of Christensen Development here in town. And I'm going to start with a question to Phil about the city's working on its long-range comprehensive plan going out to the year 2040 called Plan DSM. What are the implications for land development in the city?
Sure, let's start with just a little bit of background because I think it's relevant to the discussion. The City of Des Moines has had a zoning ordinance that's long overdue for an update. Our last wholesale update of the zoning ordinance was in 1963. Our zoning codes are largely Euclidean zoning, and they are auto-dominated zoning patterns. And while they have been updated over the years, a wholesale reworking of those documents has not occurred since 1963. Our last comprehensive plan was done in the year 2000, and it's also a little long in the tooth, so it's time to redo that. We are coming off a period of an incredible planning effort. You'll recall that we began with the Tomorrow Plan, which is a regional plan for the metropolitan area, and how we are going to accommodate the population growth that we anticipate will occur in the metropolitan area. The Tomorrow Plan laid out a concept of nodes and corridors and interconnectivity that occurs between areas in the community as a whole, the wider communities in the metropolitan Des Moines. Our plan, DSM, is the local implementation of those principles, where we take the ideas of nodes and corridors and apply it strictly to the city of Des Moines. The nodes and corridors then provides us the guidance of where we might begin to see opportunities for densification to accommodate the growth that we anticipate. The projections show the city of Des Moines growing by 40% by 2040. So where will that 40% live? What will that population look like? Des Moines is coming off a period of population decline. Just this year, we have hit our highest ever population. We are in a period of decline from the 70s through the 90s, and we turned that around, and now we are seeing positive population growth. A lot of that has occurred in the downtown area, but it's also occurring out in the neighborhoods. Our existing development patterns have largely been reactionary. So the development community comes to us with an idea, and then we sort of say, does it fit with what the community character plan currently says? And if not, we modify the plan. That sort of process, reactionary process, leads to a lot of angst amongst the developers and the neighborhoods because there is no predictability negotiated. This process, if we're successful, would envision a series of detailed areas, plans, form-based documents that would suggest that if you build to a certain form, a certain building model in certain areas of the community, we will then in turn pave the way for that development to occur. So we trade off time. We would give you an administrative process to run through rather than a series of public meetings. What it amounts to is making the decisions in advance based on the types of development patterns we hope to see, and then making that easier for the development community so they have the predictability in those areas. It is also a trade-off for the neighborhoods who are always concerned about what products may occur in their neighborhood and whether or not it's objectionable in some fashion. So getting the form of the development correct up front then becomes key. And we have that conversation in advance of a specific project so that we make those decisions under informed circumstances. So that's the most exciting piece that I see for Des Moines. We'll do the comprehensive plan. We anticipate that it will be adopted by City Council in April. And right on the heels then, there is an implementation chapter. And right on the heels of that will be this rewrite of the zoning ordinance. That'll take another 18 months, and at the end of it all, we'll have a new set of development regulations that will guide the growth into the year 2040 or thereabouts.
Does all that work help or inhibit or intimidate or from the development standpoint, from working with the development clients?
I'll jump in on that. I think the clients we've been dealing with have been asking for form-based ideas so that they know coming in if their idea fits in the neighborhood. I will say, I think all the cities in Des Moines have been more receptive in the last definitely 5 years, even a decade, to different ideas and different thoughts coming forward and trying to figure out how to make these things work. In my mind, the form-based code and that approach is just the next step to make that an easier process. The one question I would ask you, maybe Phil, or you guys as well, is you talked about the auto-centric zoning. Do you think we've actually moved past the auto-centric idea? I mean, parking still king. Anything we're dealing with, we've still got to address the autos. And I would like to think we're past it, but I don't know that we are.
I think we're in a transitional period where automobiles will remain important to the community, but we want to provide the opportunity for the people that are living in Des Moines or the metropolitan areas, if they so choose, to use other modes of transportation, but they don't have to be reliant. That helps our low-income folks enormously keep their pocketbooks sound. If they can rely on mass transit, biking, walkability, those are all important concepts. And also locating the housing near the work centers so that it isn't necessary to drive all the way across town twice a day for work. So those things all start to align when you take a comprehensive approach to this development pattern. So I would like to say that in 2040 we will be much farther away from the idea that you have to have a car than we are today. And so remembering that it's a vision and it's a process to get there, and it's not going to happen overnight. We can't redevelop the whole community overnight to be this walkable community, but we can take steps now that will make sure that we don't eliminate that option for the future.
Because downtown's had explosive growth over the last 10 years, and in the early years, there really wasn't much of a downtown neighborhood association to contend with if you had a project that was questionable to anyone. The stronger the downtown becomes, the stronger the neighborhood association becomes, which is a good thing, but I think having a blueprint for how the project should go forward is going to be beneficial on both sides of that, so that you have predictability. And I think in the East Village, there's been some planning work that's been a guide and helpful in those discussions as an example.
It's an interesting perspective for form-based zoning on where it applies in the city of West Des Moines, or city of Des Moines, I should say. In Des Moines, you have two different dynamics. You have a very powerful, very vibrant downtown, where there's a lot of capital and a lot of investment occurring, and a lot of opportunity for diverse housing and unique ideas. The value is there. the demand is there to do some great things. And this approach that Des Moines is taking will help advance that. There are other areas of Des Moines that are more sensitive, but are also opportunities where there's niches of infill areas spread throughout Des Moines that will allow for diverse housing, that could allow for people to stay in their neighborhoods, have new housing opportunities. I'm not sure how the form-based zoning will interplay with that segment of the market versus the downtown. I do know that building in Des Moines and in those infill areas is always a challenge to make sure that it is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, densities match, housing values match. It is definitely more challenging because the margins, expectations in those areas, because of all the complications, are very low and risks are very high. I don't know how form-based zoning is going to play into that type of growth in the one metropolitan area. I can definitely see it.
I can see it working very well in the neighborhood. So if you give a look at the history of how we developed, you see that we had this sort of transit-oriented development pattern to begin with. We had the railroads, the interurban lines, and those sorts of trolleys and so forth that laid down the underlying development that we're dealing with today. So where you now see strong neighborhoods like Beaverdale or Highland Park or those areas, those used to be the ends of transit lines. So if you extrapolate from that a little bit, there was a market there because that was the end of the line. So if you lay down your nodes and corridors in a fashion that respects transit, respects those development patterns, you can then start to see the opportunities that these nodes and the resulting connecting corridors between the nodes start to offer. So while you might have a very strong downtown, that is obviously something we want to continue with. But on a smaller scale, if you take a regional node like Merle Hay Mall or South Ridge area, you already have transit corridors that are there, you have heavy highways that are there, you have the development patterns that support the movement of people, so you can start to consolidate and densify in those neighborhood nodes. And so maybe at the regional nodes like South Ridge Mall or Merle Hay, you have a little bit higher density that you can develop. You can then start to say, and in the smaller neighborhood nodes, there are other opportunities that can be handled for densification of the smaller areas. I'm not talking high-rise necessarily in Beaverdale, but a 3-story form of development that has walkability as a component, where it embraces the street rather than a parking lot that embraces the street. Those sort of options are the trade-offs that you begin to talk about with a form-based code. We give you the ability to do these sorts of developments at a higher density, maybe something low to medium, medium to high densities in the neighborhoods. And then as you transition out, in the nodes and along the corridors, and as you transition out, you go from higher density to lower density to neighborhood density. So you have this sort of whole scope or a whole palette of development patterns that you might then start to use in these areas. You have to be respectful of what the existing neighborhood character already offers. So at Beaverdale, I would expect to see something that respects the Beaverdale form, the bricks, the pitches of the roofs, and those sorts of things. We have other areas of the community that are craftsmen, and other areas that are modern. Maybe it's even a pattern book that says, in these types of neighborhoods, these are the types of form. And if you do these sorts of things, then the trade-off is you get it by right, you get it fast, and you get it predictable. So I think it can work. I think it's a marvelous concept, and it's the security that the neighborhood needs to know that the character that they value is not going to be just thrown away. It respects the future, but it also respects the past. I think it's a very big opportunity.
I think that's true as long as, I think where Joe is going is that the council will then have to use that guiding document and potentially overrule vocal minority for people who are just against change. If you're I always say that when you go into a neighborhood where people care enough to stand up and contradict you, that's a good sign usually, because there's some strength in the neighborhood. But I also think it takes leadership from city staff and the council to enforce whatever's been put in place.
In certain infill areas, especially with the densities are lower, to go after the higher density to make the project higher economically feasible, it does become a greater challenge as you move away from the metropolitan area. And that's going to remain a challenge in these infill areas. What solutions can you put in place that will help promote the investment and bring comfort to the neighborhood?
So those are the sorts of things that we're starting to struggle with, I guess I would say deal with rather than struggle. So the city has all sorts of tools in its toolbox, and we have applied them without any sort of overarching guidance up to this point. So we have things like zoning, we have TIF, we have tax abatement, we have municipal improvement districts, we have property that we own, we have right-of-way, all of which can be used collectively. We all already made investment in areas, so we have infrastructure in place that can support additional density. We already have a street network, we have a sewer network, we have those things that are in place, so they are advantages. And so if we align all the tools that we have and lay them down where we want it the most, then we can use the city incentives, whatever they may be, tax abatement, TIF, or what have you, to further the city goals. That's not to say that we can't have development in these other areas. It is to say that we should use the resources that we have. We're not a cash-rich city. We should use the resources that we have strategically so that we get the best return on the city's investment that's already been made and going forward with the resources that we have. So we can incentivize what we want, where we want, in a logical way, rather than having one size fits all and not use any sort of strategy at all.
Are these logical development corridors, though? I mean, I'm assuming.
I would think
For
they
your
are.
point of
I mean,
view.
if you're talking about where, I don't have the map with me, of course, but you would start to see them. So we're talking about Southeast 14th, we're talking about Fleur, Southwest 9th, we're talking about Beaver and Merle Hay and Douglas and all the main corridors that everybody already travels. And we're aligning that with what Bart is saying with the transit routes. So where does transit already exist? What services are already there? What sort of connectivity do we already have with those services? And can we make that alignment work?
Are you out buying property in any of these areas? Do you have any clients who are putting up property in these
I can't say.
areas? It'd be premature,
This
but
is pretty early in the game, and we are in a transitional period.
Sure.
So finding our way at a transitional time is going to be one of the challenges. We have had an old pattern of doing work, and there will be the desire to continue doing that old pattern of work. And as we move forward, hopefully we can transition to this new model that says we are using the best information we have available to guide the decisions and guide the application of the limited resources that we have.
But that's not to say that somebody comes in with a development that's not in those corridors that do not.
Certainly it's going to be looked at, and certainly that's property owners' rights to develop their property. But that doesn't mean that it would be necessarily eligible for assistance. It would probably be market rate. If it does happen, let's say we're looking at one of the annexation areas. Now, we don't have streets out there. We don't have fire stations. We don't have police stations. All of those connections need to be made. So if we had in an annexation area, somebody come in and say, we want to do a development out here, well, what will the cost, the true cost to the city be? Will we have to build a fire station sooner? Will we have to put a new roadway in? Is the sewer there? Is the water there? Those sorts of questions should be asked. And then the decision can be made, is the investment that the city is being asked to put into this development, does it have a return on that investment for the community? In many ways, it's kind of asking the question, is it right for development now? Should we be growing from the inside out or from the outside in? The pattern that we've had so far is hopscotch. We go here, we go there, there's no coordinated effort. Public Works puts in a sewer over here, Waterworks puts in a sewer over there, and when the development occurs, we get half a road until the rest of the property owners in the neighborhood start to develop it. That's a pretty haphazard way of developing. Guided growth seems more logical to me.
I seem to recall a kind of housing problem on 88th Street in West Des Moines, where I was out with Mill Civic for a while. Sort of had to have a road.
I think that's one of the bigger challenges, especially following the recession in terms of economic growth, well, not only Des Moines, but even West Des Moines, Waukee, Urbandale, is where is the infrastructure, what kind of public investment was put in place to promote orderly growth. We are definitely seeing costs of construction escalate. A lot of people are thinking that those cost escalations are associated with significant progress in the development community. I can attest to the fact that it's not the case. You're seeing more margin erosion with the inflation of costs because the development community is now having to absorb more public infrastructure expenses to extend those facilities to the developments, especially in the fringes.
And if you're downtown and you're just adding to costs that are already higher than what you run into in a greenfield development.
Perhaps, but
Correct.
also the infrastructure is there. The investment has been made in the streets, the sewer, and the water. So yes, you may have some site clearing costs, and yes, you may have some environmental costs, and I'm not trying to minimize those. Those are significant costs. But the infrastructure is already there, and we have lots of redevelopment opportunity. We have miles of underperforming commercial space in this community. Southeast 14th, we don't have enough rooftops to support the commercial that we have there now. So an orderly growth pattern would suggest that maybe we don't need as much commercial space along Southeast 14th. Maybe some other model that brings in more rooftops so that commercial can follow. The commercial will follow the rooftops. You've seen it downtown, and you'll see it elsewhere. You have to have a critical mass before that occurs.
We also have significant numbers of blocks of surface parking lots that really don't do anyone good.
That's exactly right.
As a taxpaying citizen, you look at the grid that's been paid for and the puzzle pieces within that, whether it's land or if it's parking lot downtown, that makes all the sense in the world to fill those in. I think to Joe's point, one of the big challenges, you have development costs, and downtown, I would argue that they're just different. You may have put in a road and water and utilities. In my seat, we have those, but we're dealing with 100 years of buried rubble and whatever environmental situation has occurred. So those kind of equal out. I think in most cases that the cost increases are in large part due to the lack of labor, which is in part a byproduct of the recession, but also a byproduct of our slow population growth in Iowa as a whole and our extremely low unemployment rate. So we just do not have the labor that we had pre-recession, and it's having real impacts on costs, which thankfully in this period we have runaway increases and sales price increases, but not at the same pace.
I want to back up to commuting for a second. Jake, you talked about something called reverse commuting, recent downtown event.
If you look at traditional commuting where people desire to live in the suburbs for whatever reason, and yet the employment center was downtown, the reverse commute is basically the same thing. Somebody is choosing to live in the downtown environment, but happens to have employment for whatever reason in the suburb. And so it's a reverse commute to, we have 80-some thousand people who have the traditional commute to downtown, whether it's across the street or coming from the suburbs on the freeways. It's just the opposite of that. But the cause of that is that downtown has become another compelling choice for housing. At least there's a significant number of people who are making that choice. And so there's certainly numbers of employment opportunities in the suburbs, so those people have an easier commute because they're going the opposite way.
What are the opportunities still downtown? Sometimes though it seems as though there isn't a lot left, but Hubbell keeps finding places to build some of their unique townhomes. You recently picked up the Olympic Walls lot, I think, and I'm sure you're eyeballing more in sort of off of Martin Luther King and South. How does downtown still look?
I think, everywhere you look, there's a project, it seems, but everywhere I look, there's opportunity. My mentor taught me when I first got into real estate, there's a finite number of puzzle pieces. The people move around and the owners change, but those corners and the buildings, they exist in one form or another. So we all hopped in a car for this, I think it would be pretty easy to show you there's almost unlimited opportunity still in downtown. You talk about connecting the neighborhoods to the downtown. In downtown, I think about connecting the pods of really positive things, and we have big gaps in between them, so it's just a smaller version of the same connection that the Tomorrow Plan's trying to, or Plan DSM is trying to accomplish. Our downtown is so spread out and not that dense yet that we have a lot of opportunity to fill in the gaps.
It's about filling in the gaps. The nodes are starting to develop. And there's just a lot of opportunities out there as you drive around downtown.
Jake, I believe one time you said we had 25 years of growth just in parking lots along downtown.
I guess that's kind of I wondered where that's where this was going to go. I mean, they seem to be the great development opportunity du jour anyway.
Well, when you can go down, so arguably our two most prominent streets are Grand and Locust, and when you can bike or get in a car and drive down them and find numerous vacant parking lots on our two main downtown thoroughfares, and then that just gets more prevalent the further away from those two corridors that you get. There's a significant amount of opportunity without tearing anything down.
I think you're right. It comes down to the capital's there, the demand's there. It comes down to creativity and making sure that the solutions are in place to build on that creativity. As Phil mentioned, with new zoning changes, those regulatory changes to promote that creativity is what's going to allow them to continue to grow and be successful.
I see opportunities all over town as well. I look at the Market District over in East Village. The area south of the East Village has a very hot area coming much faster than we anticipated. The River Point that Hubbell's currently building in from River Point West to Gray's Landing, all of the area south of ML King. I'm absolutely thrilled that we now have speculative office space happening in downtown. I think the corridor along ML King in general will continue to go even as we talk about the areas east of downtown as the Southeast Connector is completed. I think those are big opportunities. Some of the areas that we're laying down with the new land use plan suggest some higher densities around Gray's Lake, so some downtown development patterns around Gray's Lake where you can see some high-rise residential occurring. Those sorts of things are big opportunities. The opportunities, you've seen some interesting things happening along Ingersoll, and that's a highly used corridor. There's already transit on it. It's very walkable. It's getting better. Along Grand Avenue, those areas where we have some natural densities and amenities already occurring can be replicated elsewhere. So what's linking up those areas, creating those connections, continues to drive opportunity.
Downtown is resolving issues on the Dyko property. Is that key to opening up that big piece of railroad development land? I mean, does that have to happen before, do you think, before there's a plan for the Norfolk Southern land?
I think any development that occurs around Dyko is going to be looking for a solution with the Dyko Center. Absolutely. It's such an opportunity, and the pressures are there now. It's just waiting for the solution. We are working on solutions, but not ready at this point to say.
But do you think there's anything, I mean, I know the city's been trying to do something there for several years, and in recent years in earnest, I believe anyway. Can you give some idea of whether you're a few years, months?
I wish I could.
Weeks.
It would be entirely inappropriate to say this.
We wouldn't want to put you on the spot.
I'd love to be able to say what I can say, but the timing is very critical right now. So discussions that are occurring are a huge opportunity, and there seems to be a willingness now that hasn't been there before. And I think that's probably as much as I can say. We're trying to exploit that willingness.
I think it's the next, when Gray's Lake was pitched, Gray's Lake was the huge eyesore as you came into the downtown area from the airport. Now the Dyko site is the very next, kind of black mark on the opportunity that exists. So I agree, it's important. Hopefully something gets done. But look at what Grace Lake did for us.
I'm kind of curious, too, about the process that Kyle Kraus and Comago went through in choosing their spot downtown for the Cross Gateway Center. Confluence was very much involved in helping them make a decision. Can you talk about that a little bit, Chris?
Yeah, I think, as we looked at, ultimately it came down to what was the feeling they wanted, what is their culture, how did they feel about where they wanted to be, and as you look, at greenfield sites or downtown sites, then it came down to what could be assembled quietly, where could they fit, and walking them through that process, but really understanding what their vision was, and ultimately their vision was to have that signature type of building and be in a downtown environment. So that it wasn't like this site was better than that site. It was really just understanding what they were after. So
Was there any consideration of connecting their employment base to their corporate headquarters?
yeah, no, and that's you talked about, and this all take even away from coming over. As we've talked to various individuals and groups looking at, say, Kettlestone, that's part of their thought process is that's where my employment base is versus everyone's going to drive to me to get a job. They're now looking and saying, oh, I want to be closer to where that is. And a big part of it is the walkability, for come and go, I think ultimately, the walkability, the amenities that their employees can have access to that you don't necessarily get in a greenfield development that are already made downtown. You don't get the food trucks, you don't get that stuff out west, but there are other amenities, and because of our involvement in Kettlestone, I'll use that as an example. The city really tried to approach that project and say, what are the amenities that people are going to demand? So their whole water, utilizing stormwater to create the amenity spaces is something that they bought into right away, really, because it's about the amenities. That's what's pulling people in. It's not, is this the easy place to develop anymore? It's what do I get out of it?
The big intersections at Kettlestone, how do you kick off development in that big green space? I mean, does office lead the way there, or, I mean, I know there's residential.
So there's already a lot of
around it,
residential.
right.
And so there's those rooftops, as Phil talked about, rooftops will drive commercial and office. A little bit, I think it's going to be chicken and egg type of deal of who wants to come first. There's been a tremendous amount of interest, both local developers and out-of-state developers looking at that corridor and that possibility. I don't think a lot of people realize until Grand Prairie Parkway went through how massive an area was being opened up. But it's the other part of it is there's kind of this idea that that's the westward side. If you really look at an aerial and zoom out, what's Kettlestone is a dome between Des Moines Golf and the rest of it. So I think the rooftops will help drive that.
Prosperity Express is going by. Okay. I think we can hear you.
From what we see in driving commercial investment, even in our own commercial portfolio, is definitely, as Phil said, involves the rooftops. You need a diverse mix of housing to support that commercial activity. It's often said that the CEO of the company often wants to live near the business. So you have to supply the hiring homes. You have to supply homes for the workforce. You have to supply homes that drive the retail services that everybody wants in the area. We try to build all our models off of residential first and commercial. It's shown to be successful when Johnson's doing along the Roman corridor, the redevelopment through there, where they're inviting density and new residential development to help kick off new retail investment and office investment. Same concept Phil mentioned about rehabilitating areas in Des Moines and bringing more vibrancy to the commercial areas. Really, diversity of housing that hits all spectrums of livability is key to both office and retail users.
And I think the livability is part of what I heard Kyle speak at the groundbreaking for Come and Go. And one of the goals that they had is in their ability to recruit talent. And I know that there are other employers across the metro who are taking a careful look at how their campus setup and their campus location contributes to their ability to attract and retain talented people. And as the millennials come into the workforce, that is a unique shift that we're all having to manage, and who knows what they will do.
Millennials grew up with their baby boomer parents with granite countertops and nice amenities in the home and a lot of opportunities. And they want to carry that lifestyle into their own. They're looking for the trails, they're looking for bars to walk to, they're looking for the coolness factor when they enter into your building. They want all the high-grade stuff that their parents have, and that's what's being offered downtown in these areas that are drawing those millennials. And I don't know if that came into play with what Come and Go was done, but we're seeing the millennial generation gravitate to downtown because that high quality is there, the value is there that they're looking for. And it expands not only for what they get in their home, but to the dog park, to the ability, again, to walk to the grocery store or walk to.
Are 60-somethings looking for the same thing? I could ask myself that question.
They're one and the same almost.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're a reflection,
very much,
really.
yeah.
Are you starting to see that downtown in particular, or?
I heard an interesting dynamic the other day that intrigued me. A lot of people from outside of the state, instead of buying a second home along a lake or a river, are now buying townhouses in Des Moines because they want to come visit the city. So their second home is now in the city. I find that very interesting.
We have apartment people that are doing the same thing. And Ken Sovereign from AARP, I've watched a couple of his presentations, and he actually says what you just articulated, which is, what does my 65-year-old AARP member want? The same thing as your 17-year-old son or daughter: freedom, mobility, and options, or something like that. And so that those two groups really do have.
And the same level of amenities, from what I understand.
Yeah, part of that's the student housing. I mean, when we went to college, I can tell you there's very different than what they get.
I'd like to see a contemporary modern dorm.
The towers in Ames is nothing
I
but
live
very
for my grandkids.
They have to.
And but, that's kind of like what Joe was talking about, even with the students and employers, it's about recruitment and retention. You provide these amenities, whether it's to get them to come to your school or get them to come to your development.
Baby boomers and millennials alike are looking to connect to their community. They want to be part of it. They want to be active in it. That's what downtown right now is.
When I think downtown too, also, you talked about the mix of the CEO can live there as well as the employee. It's a little bit easier in the downtown environment to put those things together and not seem out of place than it is some of the greenfield developments.
It does get a little bit more challenging in the greenfield area to try to create diversity of housing, especially in the suburbs, because their zoning formats are mostly one size fits all. We want all the same, or don't you dare mix that lower price point of housing in my neighborhood type of reaction. A little more challenging to do there. We are doing it through conservation development, integrating trails, through using stormwater as features that people can connect with the environment, do something for the community. That's important to people as well. And we're seeing a migration in these greenfield areas to incorporate, like the Kettlestown, more interaction between the built environment and nature.
Did you ever think you'd see a time when stormwater management would be an amenity in the development setting?
You know, not to toot our own horn, but you know, we've always looked at how do we make this an amenity. Getting everybody else to buy in has been a little bit of a challenge, but and then to take it to the scale that what Hubbell's done with some of their conservation design communities and what Waukee did with Kettlestown is you know, really kind of bringing it to the forefront and making it.
I'm going to pick on engineers here. I don't think it's lack of developers wanting to pursue it. I don't think it's because planners aren't promoting it or landscape architects aren't promoting it. It comes down to engineering specifications and the way we've always done things. The water is bad, get it out of here kind of attitude. More infrastructure is better than less. If you take it away from the developer, you're giving them something for free kind of position. That's shifting now that people are seeing what an amenity can provide. It's been slow, but I think we're starting to see that turn.
To that point, I think it's interesting that some of the perspective of the tomorrow plan and the comp plan are reflected in that way of thinking as well. So when we're talking about connections, we're also talking about wildlife connections. And there's been an enormous movement along these waterways. Watershed authorities have now surfaced on every one of the creeks and rivers in our area. And there are discussions now about how these natural areas connect. And it was a logical extension in my mind of what the trail network started with. You're using the natural areas as an amenity. Well, it can also be a stormwater buffer amenity. It can be this natural widest conclusion, and then supporting development on the outside fringe of that, rather than continuing to allow at-risk structures to be continue to exist. And if you take 4 Mile and you connect it with the areas up through Ankeny and you go all the way up to where is it, Berlin, maybe, you have a corridor now that becomes a wildlife corridor where you can now start to introduce some wildlife into the community. We have that opportunity all over the city. We have marvelous corridors. We have it in Warren River, the Raccoon River, every one of our creeks. They're not a liability. They're an amenity.
And that's a shift in thinking.
Yeah.
You're right. There was a point in time where these things were a liability. How do we channelize it, push the water out? And now faster, better, deeper, quicker. Yeah. So it's that shift in thinking, and it's fun. It really is.
Now make the same shift with the roads. We don't have to get people out there.
As fast as we do. You're right.
In our opinion, Hubbell, it's a better way of thinking to use those open spaces as amenities to regionalize stormwater so that everybody can benefit from it. There's some challenges to other things at play, but I think when we can create a win-win out of that facility, it just promotes further investment and
Along the lines of runoff, I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about topsoil. Is that isn't a resolved issue yet?
It is actually resolved on the state level. The state of Iowa implemented a 4-inch topsoil rule for development. And as you know, Hubbell Realty Co is a big advocate of conservation development and using soil wisely in its practices so that stormwater is not only absorbed into the environment, but it's left in a cleaner state when it's received. And you see that throughout our conservation work with flood control. What we were wholly against was a regulation that was almost impossible to achieve, and all the enforcement that went into it that just layered cost upon cost upon cost, because people were fearful of the litigation that would take place if it was not exactly here to adhere to. You know, the simple practice of respreading the topsoil happens every day on land development. A lot of people think land developers sell topsoil. We absolutely do not. That's a myth. It costs you way too much money to get rid of topsoil. It's not an economically feasible model. It's not usable for structural fill. It's just a top.
So, I mean, a lot of times we're trying to figure out how can we use it.
Use it up and use it on site.
And move it the
Where
least
it's
amount of
not
time.
Yep, where it's logical, where it stays fluffy and can handle stormwater. What happened was the state adopted a rule that when it was implemented had good intent, but was very difficult to achieve and very costly to achieve. We want the state more focused on doing exactly what happened at Calstone, Glen Village, Milwaukee, Crosshaven, and Johnston, where you're taking more of a regional perspective, you're looking at the whole system together, creating those amenities, putting soil where it matters, putting vegetation where it matters, and treating and handling the water that's gonna be feasible for construction and do exactly what it needs to do to protect the environment. We didn't want to see something that was creating waste in the system that was prohibiting us to do those conservation methods. When you just say, just do this 4-inch roll and you start layering all these costs on top of it, it starts pulling away our ability to add more craygrass, to add more walking trails, because the cost of shifting is something that doesn't matter. That's why we were more advocates for conservation design, using natural waterways appropriately, using topsoil where it should go, versus just this rule of it has to meet this absolute everywhere, achieve it, compact the heck out of it, and put sod on top of it, and move on, and wait. And we witnessed it, wait for the lawsuits to come in and say you didn't meet exactly the
Well, are you fighting to fight individual communities then, or
We're not.
maybe that's not the best way to put it?
I'll say this, the state has reversed what it has done, okay, for topsoil, so that's not a mandate right now.
Mhm.
We are still proactive in our conservation. What you see cities like Clive doing is implementing rules of, they want now 8 inches, and then they want you to solve the stormwater problem for the community. Now Clive has very little area left with development. I think they would be better off with more regional approaches, conservation design styles personally, and because trying to achieve what they want, I don't think they're going to get out of development, because it just adds so much cost that it's just not feasible for someone to invest in that kind of strategy.
So Clyde has a limited amount of development land. Does that intimidate developers?
I
Does that remain undeveloped land for?
I will say that it will prevent investment from developers to go in with that kind of approach, because the magnitude of moving around soil and augmenting that soil with organics is so cost prohibitive that you'll see us migrate to areas that take more of a logical approach, like walk uses. We welcome your conservation ideas. It's an economically feasible model. That's where we're going to put our resources versus find something that we see just doesn't work logistically in the construction process, or makes financial sense for someone who's trying to achieve a $300,000 home. There are wealthy people that can afford these processes, sure, but when you're trying to hit where the mainstream buyer is, those cost additions start pushing investment.
I have a question. More times I go over a property with heavy equipment, for example, spraying topsoil again, don't you hit the same issue with compaction? I'm not trying to play an advocate on either side of it, but it just seems to me that any site is going to become a heavily compacted site by and large.
And Chris, you can talk to this. That was our biggest concern, that when you're applying organic soil, first of all, you have to strip the topsoil, push it away, and put it back. Soil will lose density, will lose air, will lose its organics and start breaking down. So you have less than what you started. And then putting in place, as you know, through your farming practices of putting it down, you're compacting full further in the construction process. That's why we keep saying, okay, let's place soil where there's least disruption. Let's put it where it makes sense so that it can absorb and stay in its organic condition to the greatest extent it possibly can. Much like a farmer would think about where he wants his soil in his field. Where is it going to produce the most crop? How are you going to get the most organic matter out of it? Where is it going to be able to absorb the water or release water? Let's put our soil where it makes sense and look at it from a bigger perspective, more of a landscape architect view of the development than just simply put it there, pack it to 4 inches or so, and everybody's going to be happy. Because we've noticed even when you were following those rules, has it changed the dynamic of the lawns? Has it done much to help stormwater? Those runoff coefficients are still very high.
No, the runoff, because it all comes down to what that compaction is, and once it's compacted, it doesn't matter if it was good topsoil or not. It can't absorb, that space is gone. And
you have hundreds of trades on the development site working at any given time. And that soil is changing constantly on a daily basis. We need solutions in place that are achievable and that will solve the problem. And again, it's like we're being pushed these more regional perspectives.
buy-in now on the regional perspective. It's come around. And even what the city's looking at, that's really why it's not necessarily dealing with stormwater. It's thinking about the regional perspective versus just the one-off. That's an important part of the whole process, no matter where we're at.
Something that's always fascinated me, and it doesn't matter whether I'm talking to a developer, talking with Phil or someone, a public official, people who can look at Fourth and Court, for example, and see what rises out of the ground. You see it in their mind's eye. The piece of land that the Hansons picked up down by the river. I was extraordinarily skeptical of that, but it's a pretty creative project. When does it strike any of you? I know that some folks over in City Hall had a vision of the riverfront Y site, while the riverfront Y was still blocking their view. When do you realize when do you see a spot at what point and say, well, this is what I have here. This is what I think I'm going to have. Does it work that way? It seems to.
I would take that, I guess. The more time I spend doing what I've been doing for the last 14 years, the easier it becomes to just drive down the street and kind of imagine something different in any particular location. So it's gotten easier. At first, I would start with something maybe a little more prescribed, like I had a general idea, and then I might find a spot where that might make sense. But at least for me personally, with experience now, it's pretty easy to just imagine.
Well, I'll pick on you for something you said at another downtown meeting. You were talking about consequence and sort of breaking the landscape, the architectural landscape a little bit. And I thought, gee, that's an interesting thought.
Well,
What kind of reactions are you going to get to that?
Pretty positive reaction.
Yeah,
because,
That's just spin. That's just spin.
There's actually no paper to prove it. I think that when you go to interesting cities, that usually the most compelling thing that happens there, whether people realize it or not, is the kind of unique experiences. And then I think in this particular case at East 4th and Court, happens to be a Quonset hidden behind a fake front on a building. I think that when we're done with that building, that people will be surprised that it's there and has been for a long time. Chris and I actually did a building a long time ago, 2004, that people asked us, all we did was remove the paint from it. And people said, how did you make that building look so old? Well, it's 100 years old, that's how it looks old. And they didn't realize that it was there. So I think the similar thing will happen, maybe even a little more profound on the Quonset hut, because we'll remove the fake front, and then we'll put a really cool tenant in there, and it'll be something different that you don't see every day.
Our colleagues out there are risk takers, they are researchers. We are always looking for the next good idea, the next opportunity, traveling around the country saying, hey, that's cool, that would look great. And to give the consultants credit, we rely heavily on some very creative minds from the staff level to the private sector to help generate those ideas. And it's the dynamic of bringing together people who know how to work with finance, find the investors, have that mindset like Jake has, and bring it all together and just push an idea through and then see how it all kind of puzzle all fits together and just keep moving in a direction and you get something cool out of it.
Chris, have you ever been in a situation where you told someone, no, you don't want to do that?
No.
Jake, you ever told Jake that?
No, I don't know that I've told Jake that. We may have told
Worked on
him.
projects.
But no, part of what we really try and do is, it comes down to what's the owner's vision. But we've got the experience and we know things that work and things that don't work and want to suggest. And we want it to be successful. As Joe talked about those puzzle pieces, that's a big part of what we have to do as the consultants is take the pieces and make sure they start to fit together and make sense. But ultimately, it comes back to somebody who's driving the project forward, whether it's on the city side or the developer side. You talked about one thing. You've done a really good job of getting those good tenants. So what's the magic bucket?
I think that we've been lucky in some respects, but part of it is recruitment. I mean, I've spent, in many cases where we have tenants that people would refer to, I have spent 2 years talking to them about ideas, locations, timing. People say all the time that real estate is location. I argue all the time that it's just as much timing. You have to have a really good spot, but you could have a perfect spot, in Waukee 10 years ago, and you could go broke between then and when it was actually the right spot at the right time. And that same thing happens downtown, and with the tenants that we've been able to create spaces for. The other thing I think we do reasonably well is that we really try and set up the spaces with the tenants' needs in mind, just trying to achieve the maximum success for them, because at the end of the day, as their landlord, if they succeed, we'll fine. And so I think that's service well.
You brought up a good point, and I agree with you. You're right. You always hear location. But there's another saying in real estate that time kills all deals.
Right.
It is true. If you don't hit that exact timing point, you could see your project go south.
I think that's an interesting point as well, because the success that we're seeing downtown right now is the work of my predecessors for the last 30, 40 years, and they had a good vision, and they had a good idea, and they spoke to the community and said, what are the barriers? What's keeping you from putting housing downtown? We amended our codes, our regulations. We adopted codes that enable us to rehab these old buildings, and we lessened parking in mixed-use districts. And coincidentally, we hit a timing period where it became cool to be urban again. And so everything happened, it's almost serendipity in a way. We got to a very great point through great timing, but it was good, solid work to begin with. So there's equal parts luck and equal parts good planning, good thinking, good collaborative work.
Did you think what is it estimated that the downtown population will be 11,000 by the end of the year, this year, I think? Could you have imagined that 2 or 3 years ago, or is that kind of a blasé number, or not?
So
It
the
seems
goal
kind of
was
significant.
6,000 new units in 10 years. Unfortunately, we had a recession in the
Got
middle.
away.
So we hit that this year with 6,000 units, and no signs of slowing down. So was it? No, I think it was realistic. The market is always going to throw curveballs at us, but if you're persistent, maybe we can win in the end.
I think that what Phil described in terms of the changes to code and the planning and the city council setting it, basically verbalizing the goal so that people knew what was, was trying to be attained was a big part of it. But the other thing we had working for us is the work in the 70s and 80s and early 90s to retain the strong employment base that we have. Because if you look at percentages of the number of people who live in our downtown compared to the workforce, our ratios are still, in spite of the success we've had over the last 10 years, still out of whack. We have a lot of capacity. If you look at the 80,000 people who work here, a larger percentage of those at least should or could live closer to their work.
And that's really what's driving a lot of
Yeah,
the vacancy rates are so low.
But Joe, you spoke of the amenities, and there was good solid work done on the amenities too. We kept the employment base, but then the whole Vision Iowa process, where we really focused and leveraged the resources that we had to make the most of the new projects that were downtown. So creating Wells Fargo, the whole event center out of what was once Feds, it was transformative, and the Science Center, the River Walk, the vision, the principles put into the river and the activity that that offers. I think that those are all key pieces of what has made us successful today.
And success builds upon success. I think that's the big part of what we've seen in the last, since the coming out of the recession. People, it's cool to be downtown and there's things to do. I can remember coming to town 20 years ago. There wasn't a whole lot to come downtown for, but that's changed around.
Is there anything by way of the type of a product or that's on the horizon that just is a real, would be a real eye catcher that you talk about? Or?
Next big wave.
Yeah, what the next big wave?
That's the interesting idea, right? It's that's where the big thinkers make all their headlines. I kind of think the organic movement is starting to get some legs under it. So, the box, the downtown box, we have plenty of those glass boxes. That was the big thing for a while. The workplace is evolving, and how people want to work is evolving. Right now, it's cool to have a cool workplace that has the little sleeping nooks and the collaborative spaces and those sorts of things. What the next big thing is, I don't know. I'm seeing this sort of organic look that's starting to grow a little bit, and I start to wonder, okay, how is that going to mesh with the new technologies? They're printing buildings now, 3D buildings, 3D printers. How's that going to change architecture? Those are the sort of things that intrigue me. Am I suggesting that they're going to happen tomorrow? No. But I look at what happened with the Cross Gateway Center, the way that that's approached the environment around it. I see the logical progression there. It's just exciting stuff.
Did that design just catch everyone off guard a little bit?
I really
It's pretty
appreciate
unique.
I appreciated the process that they went through to get that. I mean, they went through the visioning process. They evaluated visual preferences and workforce preferences. That was unique in the way that people have approached development, at least in my experience. It happens on maybe smaller scale, or it happens on the neighborhood level, or it's a process that we use in the corridor planning, for example, the neighborhood planning. But as a building planning exercise, it's less common, and I found it really refreshing.
I don't think most people appreciate the impact that building is going to have, regardless of the people and the jobs and all of that. I think that it's going to be so iconic that people will come to Des Moines just to see it.
Absolutely. And what's nice, what's especially nice, is that it just adds to the rich fabric that we already have. We have a great history of architecture in this community.
I was going to say it's a great way to draw attention to the architecture of the city, also. Chris, you seem as though maybe you were going to disagree a little bit.
No, I'm not going to disagree. I think you go out and you search out a world-renowned architect, you're gonna
You're
get
gonna get.
an iconic building, and I think they did. You asked the question, surprise, nobody should have been surprised that it's a unique building, and that they've gone through a tremendous process in our estimation of being involved. It's been a really great process to be involved in.
I don't think it creates surprises. I think it creates excitement for us, for the companies that are investing in downtown. Because when you see someone make that kind of their own investment, it just promotes you to do more. Right? Success promotes success. And so I think for us, it just generates that excitement and keeps us moving forward to take more risk and to develop the town more positively.
Does something like that help, say you have a high-rise apartment tower or something along those lines, and that may have had difficulty drawing financing, for example. Does that help bring a new kind of investor who's not afraid of a high-rise apartment building into the city? Or is it just everything else that's been going on in the city and in Greater Des Moines really for the last several years? We keep hearing about the new investor coming to the area.
Jake, I don't know if you want to expand on this, but from our perspective, what investors are looking for is security in their investment, making sure that what's promised is guaranteed. They need to make market rates of returns on their investment, absolutely. I don't think they're driven, they certainly are driven by the activity in the marketplace and the value around where the investment is taking place, because that helps provide that guarantee and insurance. But when it comes to constructing the building, it really comes down to how does it pencil out financially. And that model is no secret for any developer in the marketplace. I mean, we're all trying to achieve very similar returns for our investment base.
We all have to follow the same set of rules as it relates to appraisals and banking and investor relations, whether it's internal capital or external capital. You follow a very similar set of guidelines and expectations. And so when you have to navigate a project through that set of semi-fixed rules, then we're all playing on the same field, and so you have to, the appraisers are looking backwards. So there isn't an example of a high-rise residential building for an appraiser to look back and make the promise that it can happen again. So in the interim, we have to take incremental steps. We've got strong, statistics across the board that you can point to as an indicator, but it's not a guarantee. So the first product, whatever the product type is, when you do a unique product that hasn't been done necessarily in the same format, you'll have additional risk coverages that will come from those institutions or those investors that put an additional complication on the project to Joe's point. And so it'll be a stair-step process. We've matured as a city over the last 30 years, and the whole time we've been in existence, we've gone up and down. Right now, we're in an upswing. Third-story building, one of the tallest building built in the last 20 years is the EMC Tower at 19.
And we'll hear a lot of commentary on is there another person that can provide the same opportunity? Really, what I'm telling you is we all, like Jake said, we all really play by the same set of rules. A lot of the things that you're hearing out there aren't necessarily based on financial fact. Those models are really consistent for all the developers investing in Metro.
Ken, you asked about new investors, though, and because of Des Moines' success, and because of the what I would call still very reasonable and attainable purchase price of products in Des Moines, you can be a California or an East Coast investor and look at a package from any of us that offers them a greater return than the same amount of money invested on the coast. It also gives them economic diversity. Des Moines was ranked right with Omaha in terms of weathering the recession. That's something that people look at now is how do you respond to stress? Well, our market responded very well to that. In spite of it being tough, overall our market performed performing better than most. So that's why we're seeing new investment come to town, is the economic fundamentals are solid.
We are running out of time. I want to give everyone an opportunity to express their final thoughts. Going forward in 2016, I started with Bill, so I'm going to let Joe get this process going.
2016 is, I believe, is going to continue on the success of 2015. I do see it as a better year. I'm going to talk mostly about single-family townhome development in the metro. Jake, I'll let you expand on commercial downtown. What we're seeing is across the western side of the metro, a very low supply of land development opportunities for new housing. We're going to see 2016 build out most of that supply. So there's going to be a need to replace that supply going into 2016, 2018. But that's going to have some challenges associated with it. We've seen a lot of speculation in the marketplace, people offering way too much money tying up land with too high costs. As I mentioned earlier, we all play by the same rules. Some things that are happening just don't make economic sense, and they can actually slow down that engine, which then leads to cost inflation, and we're starting to see home prices escalate, mostly in the western suburbs because of that. 2016 provides an opportunity for Des Moines, especially in its infill areas, to seek out solutions for affordable housing in the infill. We have very low mortgage rates right now. We have the most opportune time for people to buy into housing, and provides an opportunity to reinvest in those areas. So you'll see developers approaching Des Moines and other cities where the infill areas to seek out those opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, time is of the essence. We need to capitalize on it. Overall, we see in the residential side a very strong 2016 and moving into 2017.
Is the housing in the western suburbs, is it out of balance? A year ago, you thought maybe the market was in a state of equilibrium.
It was a state of equilibrium, meaning there's about a 2-year supply of lots to house it. Right now in the western suburbs, there's only a year's supply. So you're starting to see that balance shift. We're hoping to see then investment move further to the east, where housing is still struggling after the recession. It is not moving as fast as the northwest and southwest communities. It's still a little struggling even in the outskirts of Des Moines, trying to get investment going. So the price escalation we're hoping will help balance out the eastern market areas and the fringe areas outside of the urban center of Des Moines.
2016 is going to be interesting because over the last 5 years, we've increased the supply year over year of residential rentals in downtown, and yet the vacancy rate is actually tightened. This year, with the number of units that are coming online, is yet another increase, and the most significant increase to date. I think it will be interesting to see if we finally hit some actual vacancy. If we don't, then that's going to be an incredible signal that we are nowhere close to attaining what's possible for downtown. But it will be compelling to see what happens. I think that'll be a great indicator of how much runway is left on the downtown housing scene. I believe that it's going to be strong, but this will be the year to test that. Then, regardless of how that comes out, the other thing I think is going to happen in 2016 is you're going to see more retail in downtown, and I think you're going to start to hear inclinations of the first national retailers that have, for the last 50 years, only done downtown. We're starting to get looks, or I like to call them at-bats, with people that would have not considered locating in downtown in the recent past at all. So we're going to land some of those.
It's an interesting comment, and it's going to contradict something that was said during our retail video, and that is that the national retailers especially, they don't want to be lost in a mixed-use product downtown. And there seems to be a lot of emphasis on developing that downtown. But if you're getting at bats, I would seem to say that doesn't bother them all that much. But,
Well, I think every retailer's going to make their own decision,
Mhm.
obviously.
Sure.
I do think some of them are starting to look at the urbanization trends that have been going on for a long time. And some of them have a business model that fits in well with that. And those are the kinds of tenants that we're going to get a look at.
And I think to piggyback on that, part of it, I don't think is a contradiction. You're right, they do want to stand out, and there's some national people that we've heard, looking around, who would stand out being in downtown Des Moines. That's more what they're after, is they can become the destination, and I think that's reasonable. From our perspective, 2016 is really strong. There's a lot of stuff happening. I think probably the biggest thing is how much of it can actually get down to that timing issue. We talked about there's a shortage of labor to get stuff built, to move things through. We have seen some, I'm not going to say ridiculous, but people paying above market rate to tie up single-family ground out there because they're just fearful that supply's going to run out, and what are we going to do, and I need to have this. And that's going to take some time to balance out. So, but right now, everything, just based on what people want to be going. And this weather we're having right now doesn't help people's perception that we should be in the ground today. So we feel good.
I would add to all of this, I agree with all what is being said. I think we'll continue to see a demand for diversity of housing types and diversity of income levels. I also think that niche retail, boutique shops will remain strong. And I think we'll start to see a little bit of the new product of, perhaps this is what you're seeing, Jake, that the big boxes are now starting to embrace a new model that isn't the big box anymore. It's a bricks and mortar with an e-tail component, and having that bricks and mortar component short, nearby, that you can then deliver the product from in an e-environment will remain attractive, and I think that is especially true for urban areas. So I'm anticipating that sort of growth.
I want to thank you all. It's been fascinating for me. And we hope you've all enjoyed this conversation, and we'll follow up by watching the other videos that we've produced on this commercial real estate series. And I also want to make a plug for myself that my contact information will show up at the end of this video. And if you have any story ideas or questions or comments about what you've heard here today, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.